Hello everybody, this is Eavesdropping at the Movies. I'm José.
I'm Mike.
And we've just come from seeing Bohemian Rhapsody. I've got a whole series of thoughts on it really, but first of all I want to know what you think, Mike.
I think it's a film for people who already know who Queen are.
Yes.
I think it's kind of a medley. It's a very sanitised film, I think.
Yes.
That's how it comes across to me. Quite middle of the road, to be honest. And it all leads up to the big concert scene at the end. I think that's kind of the reason you're there.
Yes.
And that kind of says everything about who the film is for.
Yes.
And what you're meant to get out of it. Because that concert scene is really good.
Yeah, it's fantastic.
But I think if you didn't know kind of who Freddie Mercury was and who Queen were, you wouldn't come out of the film actually understanding why they were a big deal or how important they were to people.
Yes.
Do you know what I mean?
I do know what you mean. I have very mixed feelings about it because, I grew up with the music and I always kind of felt a kind of a connection to it. It was so a friend of mine was talking about on Facebook saying, what is this, crap about Freddie Mercury being a gay icon? I remember those years and, kind of when you were going to the discos, it was all disco music, whatever. Nobody ever heard any Freddie Mercury there, and he wasn't out, and he was in a heavy metal band, which, kind of no self-respecting gay would touch with a 10-foot pole, blah, blah. And I think in a way that's all true, but if you're just a little bit younger than that, which I am, then actually there was a connection, it was like, so this was the kind of heavy metal music that was circulating then, that actually, certainly if you were like, around 15 or 16, you weren't out yet and whatever, this was a kind of a connection point with your straight mates, that kind of, that you could listen to that together, and maybe for slightly different reasons, and certainly kind of, the name Queen and the Bohemian Rhapsody, and actually some of the songs and some of the lyrics of the songs, it did feel audacious, let's say, right?
The band, yeah.
Yeah, and by audacious I mean in quotation marks. Yeah, that it would, that it did have some gay aspect that you couldn't quite put your finger on it,
Right. Well, that was kind of glam rock, right? A little bit. It wasn't quite sequins the way that you think of glam rock, but there was a showy, flamboyant aspect.
There's a show, but I don't know. I'm not, I'm not very well versed on, the British music scene of those years, but I don't think that Queen was glam rock. I think it was like just stadium rock. It was like, I associate them with like the Rolling Stones and Led Zeppelin and people like that,
Okay.
I
wasn't there either. I know Queen, but I don't really have a good understanding of the period and that sort of thing. So I'm asking rather than.
Well, I don't know. I came to them like around the late 70s, through radio. And as I said, it was just kind of one of those points of connections between you and your straight mates. Yeah, that kind of,
right.
Maybe you liked it for different reasons, right? But, kind of, it was that kind of stadium rock that at least in some respects intersected with, for lack of a better word, a gay sensibility. And it wasn't just me, actually, because, afterwards, all of your friends of that period, who you shared this appreciation of Queen with, they all ended up being gay as well. So it was more than just an individual kind of, connection point. But I know what he means. I mean, at that point, like, it wasn't, there was always something, right? The You've Got to Be Free video, the clone look with the mustache and the Adidas and those were all and the film acknowledges
studded belt
it.
And
yes, he says, what are you, members of the Village People, right? Well, they're actually, Freddie did look like a member of the Village People in a way that was kind of like acknowledged, but as we see in the film, he wasn't out, right? So I think for me personally, there's that connection, right? And the music is meaningful to me, even though, you have this montage saying how crap it is and how how Melody Maker and the New Music Express and all the the Rolling Stone, they all said how mediocre it was. But I liked it.
Yeah, specifically Bohemian Rhapsody. I think that was on.
Yeah.
When that bit of the film happens, there's loads of headlines.
Yes,
but I mediocre, and he tries to do all these genres and blah blah blah.
Yeah, but I suspect the the press in general was snooty about all of it, not just Bohemian Rhapsody actually. But anyway, I liked it, and so I enjoyed the film up to a point because of the music, though I think it's a very disappointing film. Yeah, so kind of
it's basically, for me, it's like reading the Wikipedia page and listening to the albums, or the greatest hits. Really, I mean, it's there are few pleasures for me kind of beyond that, really, and I didn't hate it or anything, but I was constantly watching the film at a distance.
Yes.
I was kind of thinking, I was trying to think about the decisions that were being made behind everything. I wasn't in it.
Yes, I wasn't in it until the Live Aid concert.
Until Live Aid
right?
happens, yeah.
And actually, I was kind of I was trying to weigh the different factors, right? So on the one hand, you have this fascinating story about, a kid from Zanzibar who's talked of as a Paki, right? And, you're given his ethnic background, you're shown his family, right? So there is potentially a really interesting story there about, all kinds of outsiderness converging onto this mainstream success, which are not really explored, right? On the other hand, there's a whole sexual story, about coming out and so on. That's not explored. And actually, I had real trouble with the way that it was represented, right? Like, you got none of the fun. Like, all you get is, like, loneliness and cats, and, like,
Well, there's the one character, the kind of villain character, Paul, who... there seems to be a thing of, like, the more gay you are in your kind of behaviour and appearance, the more of a villain he is.
Well, actually, that was what I was going to say as well. That actually there's something wrong about a film that is ostensibly about a gay icon that makes the only out gay man for most of the film, and someone who seems to be quite at ease with himself, makes him out to be the villain of the piece.
Yeah.
So that already there is a problem, and I'm surprised that it's kind of, nobody said hello, like, this.
Yeah.
We have a problem here, right? So there are weird things that you can detect. So, for example, if it's this is not so much the story of Freddie as it's really the story of Queen. But yet, kind of, Freddie's the frontman for the film. And you think, well, why are all these other band members getting so much attention? There's always, like, there must have been some contractual approval kind of thing. Because you're always kind of referencing back to Brian May or, the other people as if they need to vet or they need to have the last word on what Freddie does or says or the direction in which he develops, right? Which is very odd, very weird. And also, I really despised the fact that you never see him reveling in being gay. And actually, to me, the film is offensive in that way. I mean, there must have been a moment where, okay, he's had his girlfriend whom he really loves, and that I really liked about
Married
the film.
her. She became his wife.
Oh, I didn't realize they were married.
Yeah, he proposes to, do you remember the ring?
I know he proposes, but I didn't realize they're married.
Okay, you don't see wedding bells.
You don't see
the
it.
church, but...
And actually, did he ever get married in real life? I don't think so.
I mean, I will find out. But I mean, there are things the film... Well, we can talk about it. There are things I think the film skips over, but at least the suggestion is that they got married because you see him propose. Well, she says yes.
Well, to me, the suggestion is that he proposes and she says yes, and then he goes to America and finds and discovers himself as a gay man. So they never get married. Because actually, if they would have gotten married, you would have heard something about a divorce, at least.
I guess so.
So I didn't understand that as them being married. I understood it as, he's in love with her, which I understand. And actually, I appreciate the film showing that. showing that this gay man can have deep and lifelong feelings for this woman, in spite of, afterwards kind of coming out to himself. But what I don't understand is the character never being shown to be having a great time. Because, I mean, can you imagine a rock star, gay, discovering gay New York, right? And, probably being like the king of the roost in New York. I mean, it must have been fantastic, right? And, you clearly see him as someone who's got, or the real Freddie Mercury, somebody who had an enormous sex drive and who got real pleasure out of, so it must have been like Dorothy and Oz going to New York, right? You see none of that in any of those things, actually, because, I mean, there is joy and euphoria in taking drugs, right? I mean, before it becomes a problem, that's why people do it. So, but you see none of that. And actually, you see none of, the pleasure in his sexuality that he must have had, even if he repented the next day or if he felt bad about himself the next day. There must have been kind of those moments in those clubs where he was alive and joyous, and and I think it's a real problem that the film doesn't show you any of it.
Also, I looked up and they didn't get married.
Yeah.
There's actually no suggestion on the Wikipedia page that he proposed.
Right.
There may be an invention for the film, I don't know. But they didn't get married. They did have this long-term relationship.
Yes. I mean, I appreciate that element about the film, but it feels, I wouldn't say homophobic.
Well, it's trying. So before Rami Malek was cast as Freddie Mercury, the film has kind of had a long history of trying to get made, and one of the first people who was going to do it was Sacha Baron Cohen,
yes,
who is famous for being Ali G and Borat. And from what I understand, that project fell apart because I think the band, particularly Brian May, basically said he wants to include too much sort of just kind of dirty stuff, like a kind of unvarnished sort of aspect to it. Because I mean, you think basically any film about a huge rock band is going to have to include some really dirty stuff, and if it doesn't, it's basically a hagiography, which is what apparently they wanted, because that's what this is.
This is.
And so I do have a problem with, like, basically when Freddie Mercury, when you see the gay side to him in this film, it's off screen, really.
It's all
people
off
talk
screen.
about it.
It's all off screen, or it's all showing decline.
Yeah.
Like no pleasure in, no pleasure in the drugs, no pleasure in the parties, no pleasure in
actually being who he is. Yeah. No pleasure in being who he is. There is talk throughout the film, and it's a theme the film is trying to develop, of identity. So it starts off with him being called a Paki, and he says, I'm not from Pakistan, he's from Zanzibar, and then there's that dinner scene with his parents, who are kind of unambiguously from the Indian subcontinent, whereas he, kind of, to look at him, you maybe don't quite know.
Yes.
And they talk about having to leave Zanzibar and coming to London. But so they say, you were born in Zanzibar, and he kind of wants to shrug it off. Yes. And I think his sister says, he was born in London at the age of 18.
Yes.
So there's this idea of rebirth, because then at the same time, this is the scene in which he tells everyone, my name, I've changed it to Freddie Mercury, from Freddie Bolsh. I forget what his original surname was, but and he does it by singing Happy Birthday. Happy birthday to me, happy birthday to me, happy birthday Freddie Mercury.
Yes.
So again, it's this idea of birth, of a kind of invention of himself.
Yes.
And then a little bit later in the, actually it's towards, it's when he's received his HIV diagnosis, and he tells the band, and he says, with the time I have left, I just want to make music, and I want to be who I am, which is a performer, and that sort of thing. So there's a theme that the film is trying to draw on, which of identity and self-determination. But you would think that being gay is part of that, but it never feels like it gets there. I mean, it's his wife, or rather his girlfriend, who has to say to him, "You're gay."
Okay. There are three things that Freddie Mercury is associated with. Obviously, the music, and that above all, right? The other thing is his gayness, and the other thing is, that he died of AIDS. Those are the three key characteristics of that one associates with him, and actually the gayness and the AIDS bit are terribly shown. I think, there's a connection made between the moment that he's diagnosed and then meeting the love of his life, right? Finding the guy Jim.
Who he connected with before and reconnects with.
That's right. And you think, well, the first conversation you have to have with Jim is how is he going to respond to your declaration of being, of being positive, right? Nothing. That's all skated over, right? As if it doesn't matter, as if there's nothing to negotiate or talk about or discuss, right? And at that time, that must have been terrifying, right? So there's, I think the film fudges it completely. I also think, this sense of, there's a really interesting story here of somebody carrying multiple and contradictory identities and navigating them through, right? So, he's a kid who went to public school, right? On the other hand, he's an immigrant. His family looks like they're middle class, lower middle class. He becomes a pop star, right? Like, he's gay, like the bandmates are all straight. And actually, and they're always shown like with their wives. Actually it's kind of, I think it's, the more I think about it, the more homophobic I think it is. So he's shown lonely with his cats, turning on lights on and off, whereas, probably he was cruising somebody, like, in the park, whereas kind of, they're always there with their partners and kind of having to go home because of the kids. Like, come on.
And the partners are allowed into the studio as well, which, well, maybe it was that friendly a studio, but I don't believe that somehow.
No, it felt.
I also don't believe. Basically, they only really start having arguments about halfway through the film. Like the journey that the band has is it's really plain sailing. Like they just get on all the time, and they present a united front to the record exec who doesn't want them to do this, that, and the other, played by Mike Myers, and you kind of feel like, okay, so I wasn't there. Maybe they actually did get on this well for a long time, but I don't believe it somehow. And actually, that whole section of the film is skating over so much stuff. I had a real problem with what drives them and what drives Freddie in particular. I have no understanding of from the film. Actually, that's when I say that it's like watching the Wikipedia page. Yes. That section of the film is it's bland. And it's just saying, then they did this, then they did this, then Bohemian Rhapsody came out. So, for instance, when they're recording Bohemian Rhapsody and they start saying, we need to get more experimental. No, it's before that, rather. I can't remember what song it is, but they say, we need to get more experimental, and they start swinging the amps back and forth through the room and putting coins on the drums and stuff. You go, okay, but why? Why do they feel they need to get more experimental? The film is showing that they're enjoying it, but it doesn't show what drove them to it. Yes. It's just showing some stuff happening, and that's what the film does for a very long time, is just show some stuff happening. But I recognise it because I know what the song sounded like.
It's a film strung along a Queen soundtrack, and Queen is obviously like this corporate cretin, that needs to protect, its capital at the moment, right? So I think a lot of the film is around protecting, what Queen stands for, because of course they're still touring, and still selling out arenas. I forget with what's his name instead of Freddie, this American pop star. So you get the sense that a lot of it is like that, and actually, a lot of it also was the most cliched storytelling, which is like, you think in 1940s film or something, how did Beethoven compose? And maybe he hears thunder and goes ta 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 ta, right? Like, this is full of stupid intros like that.
It has those moments where you recognise the bits.
Yeah, of how a song came to be in the most cliched way possible. And that's half the movie.
Mind you, it's not so bad as the Straight Outta Compton, the NWA hagiography, which again was a hagiography, like Eazy-E, because it was made by Ice Cube, I think, produced by, and it stars his son, and there's that bit where it's the intro to a scene, like it's not actually about the song, but it's Snoop Dogg, I think, on a keyboard, and he's just fiddling around, and then he starts playing oh shit, man, I can't remember the bloody song, but it's that really famous riff.
I'm so glad I'm not the only one.
Yeah, no, let's see, nothing but a G thing. He's on the keyboard, and he's just mucking around.
No.
And he's doing that, and then like eventually he comes up with the riff.
Yes.
And it's like, and you go, oh, that's that riff from that song. That's when they invented it. It's in the movie.
Well,
and then he just goes,
I mean,
there are bits of that in this.
Practically, not bits. Almost every song gets a little intro like that.
Yeah, but then to be fair, they do generally say like we wrote this as opposed to we discovered it magically.
Oh well.
Yeah. But the thing is, it is what the film is doing is going through a bunch of their hits and saying, you recognise this one, you recognise this one, and like I say, this is when you go, this is who the film is aimed at. The film is aimed at the people who recognise this stuff, and we just want to hear it.
And actually, and also, it's aimed at a mainstream audience of people who recognise this stuff, and the fact that Freddie Mercury is the star is a little bit of a problem because, I mean, there was this couple next to me, and every time two men would kiss, which doesn't happen very often at all in the film, that old guy would go, "Oh dear."
Yeah, that's true.
So
I don't think. I mean, maybe picking up on something you said. I don't think they did ever break up, Queen. It's suggested in the film that he did because he went off and did these 2 albums in Germany and did a song with Bowie and stuff.
Yes.
But part of my understanding is they never actually really properly broke up. The Live Aid gig wasn't a reunion as the way it's shown in the film, and also he didn't know at the time of the Live Aid gig that he had HIV.
Yeah.
That the timeline is screwed with to make it more dramatic, I guess.
Okay, well, how accurate it is, I don't know. To make it dramatic, it makes it dramatic on one sense, but actually it kind of ruins the film for me in another sense, because, I mean, the whole thing about him finding the timing of him finding the love of his life who stayed with him until he died, I think it's really problematic the way that it's shown.
Yeah.
I
think it's really thoughtless.
Yeah, exactly. Which is true of all of the film.
Yeah.
So I think it's one of those films that people for whom it's meaning. So I have another friend who was saying that he just loved it and he didn't care what anyone said, because as a child when he was 10 or whatever, he remembers the whole Live Aid thing. And he saw it live, and that evoked all those memories. And of course, this is the finale of this film. So actually, for him, the film ended on this great high note, which it kind of does in a way.
Yeah, well,
you forget that he dies.
You get a really big, lovely medley of him playing at Wembley, and you're right there on stage with him, and the performance from Rami Malek. The physicality and the presence of his performance, you believe that this guy is a rock star. He's in control of that audience.
Yeah, he's great in those scenes. I didn't think he was as great in some of the earlier scenes, actually.
No.
I think he spoke too slowly. Like, in all of the England home scenes, right, from the beginning, I think there was something just kind of very overly thoughtful. Yes, he wasn't kind of loosely camp enough, or he didn't give the signs of just, this quick intelligence, right? Everything was slow and measured as if he was still playing iRobot or something, right? It was like this recessive figure, right?
Not iRobot, Mr. Robot.
Mr. Robot. So, I think he was much better as soon as he cut his hair.
Yeah. Which is very late on in the film.
Yeah. Then he became great, and he looked the part much more.
And actually, that intro, I was going to say that the film opens up on Freddie leaving his trailer to go and perform at Live Aid.
Yes.
And you don't see his face. You see him wake up, and he's got this big kind of strong, like kind of bodybuilder's physique shoulders. Yes. And you see the haircut at the back of his head, and you just see his moustache. He trims his moustache, and it's when it's in slow motion, and he's walking up to the stage from behind, and the camera follows him behind. So it's the white vest and the blue jeans and the studded belt and his hair and his arms, and he's kind of flexing and jumping and okay, so you can't see his face. And Rami Malek does look an awful lot like Freddie Mercury. Yes. It's quite convincing, the look, but from behind you go like, I'm actually watching Freddie Mercury. It's a pretty amazing intro to him, and to the film, which it lets down.
It lets down. I mean, I didn't like the way that the film was shot as well, because so much of it seemed to be shot with a fisheye lens. Yeah, so all the edges were blurry, right, and it was almost like a circle surrounding a face where the face was in focus and everything around it was blurry, right? And so much of the film is shot that way. I found it like really kind of, disconcerting and alienating.
There's nothing too intelligent about its look. It has what I think a look you would expect of a kind of friendly rock biopic.
Yes.
It's kind of it's fairly warm colours a lot of the time. It's shot through a sort of 70s fog. Like everything back then was dusty somehow.
Yeah, it's just bizarre. Really.
It looks like the way people like to remember the past in a way. I think like in the 70s things looked like this. They looked beige, and they were kind of beautiful and dusky, and the whole film has that kind of, it has a look that wants to make you feel great nostalgia. It was beautiful. Everything is seen through a haze.
Yes,
that's how I kind of feel about that.
It's very weird because I think in the first 1 minute and a half of the film, you get this image of, this iconic image of Marlene Dietrich smoking her cigarette with like her cheekbones sculpted with light, right? Which is such a gay icon.
It's a poster on his wall.
Yeah, it's an image of a gay icon. Then you have, I think it's Frankie Howard on television.
I don't remember.
And then you have, a pan through an image of the Queen herself, right? Like in the parents must have been the parents living.
Yeah, he's stood up and he's framed next to a painting or a print of the Queen.
And then you have cats. Right, so I think, okay, he's a lonely gay queen, right? Like, it kind of it that instantly sets up a kind of a knowing kind of context, very subtly done. And I thought, this might be better than I expected, and it doesn't. Though those images, the film returns to those images. You see that big poster being moved from house to house of Marlene Dietrich.
Yes.
Yeah.
See it a couple of times.
Yeah. So anyway,
there was something I wanted to pick up on, but I don't think it'll go anywhere. I may not even put it in the podcast.
Right.
But I there was also something about like a colonialism. I was trying to think through, which I don't think the film is either, and I think it's just something I'm picking up on from out of nowhere. But it's like the band is called Queen. And that this connotation of gayness of the word queen meaning a gay person, but also the Queen, like when he writes down on he designs the logo. Again, this is something the film just flicks through very quickly. It's like, oh, we're called Queen now.
Yeah.
And he's drawn the logo, and he says it's the only thing I can think of as flamboyant as me to claim that we're royalty, sort of thing.
Yes.
And he comes downstairs at that party dressed like a king in that kind of robe, and he says, we're all Her Majesty because we're all the band Queen.
Yeah.
But of course, he comes from a place that was a
colony.
A colony of the United Kingdom, and there is that painting of Queen Elizabeth II on his parents' house, and his parents, like the dinner that they have is, as you say, very English.
Yes.
They set the dinner table, and they have kind of very nice, delicate teacups and saucers. And
but then the pastries are all like Indian type pastries, so like those sweets, they have like those bright orange sweets, and they have the things with pistachios. They're very East Asian sweets.
So I just don't know. I didn't. The film definitely seemed to me to be trying to pick up something about royal imagery and royal. Some sort of royal connotation, maybe royal aspiration or something.
Well, for me, so there's two things, right? First of all, there's much made of the fact that, he's a Farsi, right? And we're told the story that the Farsis were kicked out of Iran, by the Muslims, right? And then kind of, the family went to Zanzibar, right? And then they were kicked out of Zanzibar. So actually there is something about the Queen in England symbolizing comfort and refuge and a home to people who are outcasts.
Parsi, right. I think.
I
think it's derived from the same term, but Persian, basically.
Right, okay. I thought
Sorry.
It was Farsi.
Farsi is the language and people, but the actual specific term for the people he came from was Parsi.
Okay.
But I think it is derived from the same place.
Right. And of course, he's got this line of dialogue saying, we're all outsiders. We're all outsiders in different ways, and our audience is all outsiders. So, we are going to make insiders of all of us, right? And then, of course, he's at the so he's like the queen of all of these groups of outsiders. So I think kind of that thing of the center and the periphery, and then also, for example, when he says, "Oh, we can organize a tour of Japan for you," well, Japan isn't good enough, but America, wow. So there is kind of all of these relationships amongst kind of the center and the periphery and where it's at, and who belongs and who doesn't. So the film is not junk. I mean, there are kind of themes and issues that it's trying to deal with. I just think that it's not aimed at gay people, and that it's a problem when that becomes the central search for the protagonist of your film, and B, that it doesn't tell the story very well.
It really doesn't.
So what's there for most people is the music and the last 20 minutes of the Live Aid concert, which are just absolutely great, I think. But that's it.
Yeah, I feel like you learn nothing coming out of it. It might be worth pointing out that the film is, I will double check the details. The story, the screenplay is by Anthony McCartan, who I don't know, but the story is co-credited to him and Peter Morgan.
Right.
And Peter Morgan is a big name in screenwriting and playwriting. He wrote The Queen, Frost Nixon, The Damned United,
yes,
Rush, and created The Crown on Netflix.
Right, which are very impressive credits.
Very impressive credits, but they do share to me somehow. Rush as well, although I love Rush to bits and I think it's brilliant. They all do share to me that what I was saying about that kind of hazy, you're looking for a fog at the 1970s sort of thing.
Yes.
That nostalgia for the way things were.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Which this does too.
So then, that's also part of the problem, because of course what happens is they do the Live Aid concert, and then, cut to the end, and then you get a title card saying Freddie Mercury died of AIDS in 1991. So, like...
It really feels like it comes out of nowhere. Like, it's not like the film hasn't mentioned that he had AIDS, but it's not actually made much of an issue of it. It's done is said, let's just kind of ignore quietly actually what really kind of being gay is and was to him and all that sort of thing. Yeah. Let's just kind of let's really concentrate on that. And then let's make sure that when he reveals he has AIDS, he has lots of friends.
Yeah.
And then let's announce that he had AIDS.
Right away. Everything that was meaningful to this man's life is erased.
Yeah, as I think is the music.
Yes.
We've talked about how the film kind of erases the gayness and the AIDS, but the music as well. Like I say, I can't impress enough how little I think the film does credit to the music. It plays the music, and there are some very nice covers and that sort of thing. Sometimes it's weird because you're seeing him sing like at his piano just in his house or something, and the song that you're hearing is clearly from a studio. Like they match up weirdly sometimes. And I think sometimes they're using the original songs, and sometimes they're using him. It's tough, So there's a weirdness to the way the music's produced. But the film does credit to the music just by playing it. It's amazing music, and it's fantastic to hear it. But like I say, what the band wanted, what they stood for, what they felt the music was about, what the meaning was to all of that, what drove them, I think there's no appreciation of that, no investigation of that. There is that one point which you mentioned, I think, about where they say this is what we want the band to be. We want the band to be for the outsiders, the guys at the back of the crowd who don't think it's for them. We're those guys too. We want to be for them. So which is great, but it doesn't feed into anything else about the music. It's just going through the motions.
And can I say again how much I resented like the representation of the other members of the band, like everything that Freddie did had to be vetted by them or acknowledged by them or supported by them, commented on, and all the time they're like smug marrieds, heterosexuals with their children, and here is like this poor, sad, lonely wreck. I mean, I'm sure they weren't all the well-adjusted married men. I mean, it's just a bit offensive. Actually, I found it. But,
I mean it's notable. I will check the details again. That Brian May and Roger Taylor, they were certainly musical consultants. So whether they were exec producers and that sort of thing, I'm not entirely sure. But I think they've been involved in the film for an awful long time. It was the kind of their film to give the okay to and that sort of thing.
I want to check the grosses because
It's got a load of money. Yeah, Roger Taylor and Brian May are executive music producers. That's how they're credited. So
there you go. It's been doing incredibly well. My God, it's so
it's giving the people what they want, and what they want is nothing that complicated.
Exactly. So it's grossed 100 million in the US, and another 151. So worldwide right now, it's 285 million on a budget of 52. So actually, it's a huge hit.
There were a couple of Americanizations I didn't like, and this is a really minor point, but there's one point where the record exec that Mike Myers plays, he's an amalgam of a load of different people. He's not he's not based on one person. He says Bohemian Rhapsody will never be a hit, period. And he's from Liverpool. He should be saying full stop.
Yes.
and there's a point where the van breaks down after they get a flat tyre, and they're replacing it. And Brian May says, you want to turn it counterclockwise. And it's anti-clockwise.
Oh, right. Okay.
It just is.
Right.
He wouldn't say. And also, I think, and this is more, this one I'm not so sure of, but they talk about the audience for Live Aid being 1 billion people worldwide. And that at that time, in Britain, I don't think people used billion to mean 1,000 million. It meant 1 million back then. And then, like in the 90s and 2000s, we got our shit together and copied America on that. But I think again, like, so what they're talking about, they would have said 1,000 million back then.
Right.
Which it's just little annoyances.
Okay.
I'm allowed them.
I didn't notice.
Yeah, I noticed those.
I still say elevator sometimes. So.
No, yeah. But you're Canadian Eurotrash, so it's allowed.
That's right. So anyway,
just little attentions to detail. I did like. There was one joke I really liked. I mean, there were a few laughs, and I was into bits and pieces of it. And I think there's some interplay between the band members that I like. There's one joke which is there's a kind of intertextual meta joke, which is that Mike Myers plays that record exec who says, no, I want this song, not that song, and he doesn't like Bohemian Rhapsody. And he says Bohemian Rhapsody will never be the kind of song that a bunch of mates get into a car with and they will bang their heads listening to it. And the joke is that's exactly what he made of Bohemian Rhapsody in Wayne's World. Yeah. And so I liked that sort of, that's like an educated snigger sort of joke.
Well, not much to offer, and actually I think ever since I found out how successful this film is, whatever little sympathy I had has gone.
Yeah. I would love to have seen the version that Sacha Baron Cohen wanted to make. That might have been like that. I mean, you get the feeling that he may have wanted to do kind of he may have wanted to go so far in another direction that it would have been sort of dishonest in a different way.
I could imagine it being creepy and nasty, actually.
But I would have much rather seen a version that was challenging than this jukebox hagiography.
Yeah. Jukebox hagiography, that's what it is. Thank you very much. And this might be a good moment to end. So, jukebox hagiography, we do not recommend. Or do you?
Well, I mean, those pleasures of like the last 20 minutes.
Nice.
Well, okay, whether I recommend it or not is kind of meaningless, really, because people are clearly getting what they like out of it. And we both agree that when it gets to him cutting his hair and Live Aid happening, that's just very enjoyable to watch. You can't underestimate. That's a really fun.
And that's the end of the film, so everybody leaves on a kind of high, in spite of someone dying of AIDS.
And I think is one of the reasons that people are being so kind to it, because like I've said before, if the end of the film is good, this is the Hollywood happy ending. If you get a good ending that leaves you on a high, you will forget things you didn't like about much earlier in the film.
Yes.
And that's what it does. So that ending is great. And one day, that ending will be on YouTube. And it'll be 20 minutes long, and you watch it and go, "Oh, that's nice."
Well, and then maybe people will forget, kind of, because I do think it's one of those films that you can imagine people setting out to be really pro-gay and so on, right? Like, but actually, the structural elements make it to me just seem really homophobic. There's much more room and space devoted to his relationship with a woman in this film than actually, you almost never see him with a man. Actually, and do you even see him kissing a man? You don't.
Yeah, you see him kiss the guy Paul, who turns out to be the villain of the piece. He kisses him when he's at the piano.
Oh, but that's to reject him. That's like.
Well, yeah, that's true. You reject him at that point.
So it's kind of.
And I think he kisses.
disgusting,
Does he
actually.
kiss? Does he kiss Jim on the couch as well when he first meets him after the party?
No.
I don't remember.
No. He grabs his butt, and the guy says, "You do that, and I'll
Yeah.
crush you or something." So like.
But then they are. But then when they're
actually,
chatting,
every moment that comes close to gay sex affection.
I think they do kiss on the couch just after that. When he kind of apologizes and they make nice and talk through the evening. I think it leads to a kiss. I'm not 100% confident.
I don't remember it.
But okay. But the point that you're making is completely valid.
Yes.
That it is scared of in a way. The kind of that huge aspect to Freddie Mercury's
This is a film
life.
who's scared of who Freddie Mercury was.
Yeah.
And why, and who's scared of, at least 2/3 of the reason of why he continues to matter greatly to a certain sector of the population, which is basically telling that sector of the population to fuck off.
Yeah.
So actually what surprises me is that, just that, some of my friends from this very same group are enjoying it so much, which is maybe something worth thinking about.
It does seem to me like it's and again this is makes me really pay attention to who is this aimed at, because it's basically saying you can feel good about knowing that Freddie Mercury was gay, but you don't have to get involved in any of the details or actually have any understanding of that. You can just go, yes, I like this guy and I like his music, and he was gay. Doesn't that make me a nice person? And isn't it nice of me to be sympathetic because he died of AIDS?
But we really don't have to
But actually,
deal with any of it.
I don't want to actually pay any attention to it because it's quite uncomfortable for me. I don't really like it.
Yes, it's like the old guy. Oh dear.
Yeah,
you don't want them to be saying "oh dear" too often during the course of the film.
But he absolutely was. He really was. It was weird. It's like, but how could you? I mean, really, to go to the Queen movie and then somehow be surprised that Freddie Mercury was gay.
I know.
But
maybe that's the thing. Anyway. We are eavesdropping at the movies.
Yeah.
And we are on SoundCloud, YouTube, WordPress, Facebook, Twitter.
I like seeing your scrunchy face when you try and remember.
And eavesdroppingatthemovies.com.
Yeah, that's the one.
Thank you very much for listening.
Bye-bye.